Thank you, Mayor. And just to add on to what Councilmember Williams has already set out, just a few quick points why I support campaign contribution limits. First, it's clear that we need to right-size our limits. Our congressional and state districts are orders of magnitude larger, and yet we have the same or a higher limit. So for example, our congressional district has about 464,000 voters, and the limit is 3,700. Our state Senate district has 622,000 voters, and the limit there is 5,500. Meanwhile, my city council district has 10,000 voters, and the limit is also 5,500. So this is clearly out of proportion to the size of our districts, but thankfully it's an easy fix, and hopefully we pass this tonight and put it to the voters. Second, aside from the issue of proportionality and having the right limits for the size of our districts and the size of our city, it's about balancing different goals. So on the one hand, we have transparency. That's certainly one of those goals. And I, again, have to give credit to our city clerk for having such a great and accessible and easy-to-use website for campaign finance disclosures, which makes it very easy to see who's donating to candidates and to PACs. Mayor, I know you've raised concerns about independent expenditures, which the task force spent a lot of time digging into and researching and wrestling with. And they couldn't establish a direct causal relationship between contribution limits and increased IEs. However, even if they had, or even if there still is lingering concern about it, which I think is perfectly reasonable to have, that's just one piece of the puzzle. And we can't focus on this concern to the exclusion of all others. So the other concerns I think we need to address are influence or the appearance of influence. So in the extreme example, we're talking about pay-to-play scenarios, directly buying votes. And that's what things like the Levine Act, our own local Taxpayer Protection Act are trying to address. But even apart from those most egregious pay-to-play scenarios, we still need to contend with the appearance of wealthy donors or the actual event of wealthy donors buying influence. So AB 571, which is the law that set the default state limits, required local governments like ours to default to the state limit unless we set our own separate limit. That statute says a system allowing unlimited contributions to a candidate for elective office creates the risk and perception that elected officials in those jurisdictions are beholden to their contributors and will act in the best interest of those contributors at the expense of the people. And so that's crucial. I think it's important that we have a limit that's low enough that it doesn't give the impression that elected officials are beholden to the people who are writing them the biggest checks. And lastly, it's going to help level the playing field amongst candidates. Some people have wealthy personal networks that they can tap into to fundraise. They have friends and family members who can write 4- and 5-figure checks to their campaigns. But most people don't. It's just the case that most people don't have that. So having a reasonable limit will mean that regular people who don't have wealthy networks that they can reach out to are not at such a stark structural disadvantage when it comes to fundraising in our own local elections. I think Councilmember Madison raised previously the point of some districts having more wealthy residents than others. And I think having a reasonable limit actually addresses that concern. So if we're talking about, perhaps, I think you may have been referring to your own district. And so if you or someone else is running in that race, instead of being able to rely on only a handful of really large donations, it actually ends up dampening the effect of having all those wealthy residents because each one of them is limited to how much they can give. And I think that's a good thing. So ultimately, it's about balancing all these competing concerns, and I think that the task force has reached a very reasonable middle ground that should go to the voters to have a say on.